What if everything you were taught about royalty was a lie? Since childhood, we've been told that kings and queens were chosen by divine right, blessed by heaven to guide nations. But what if the truth is the opposite? What if their crowns were forged, not in light but in shadow? His blood is in the throne. The demon that infected the line of kings isn't just a title, it's a revelation. Imagine that behind every coronation, every ritual of oil and prayer, there lurked a covenant with something far older, far darker. It sounds impossible, doesn't it? And yet, the evidence has been hiding in plain sight for centuries. Think about it. Wars waged without reason, dynasties that never die, curses that cling to royal bloodlines like chains. Coincidence, or the mark of demon bloodline flowing through hidden dynasties? The paradox is chilling. Those we admired as leaders may have been puppets of a shadow whispering through their veins. The very idea shakes the foundation of everything we believe about history, religion, and power itself. But it also opens a door. Because if their thrones were altars of possession, then what does that say about the world we live in now? And here's where it gets even more unsettling. This isn't just about ancient kings. It's about the systems we still obey today. From palaces to parliaments, from cathedrals to corporations, the same patterns repeat. His blood is in the throne is not just a story of the past. It's a mirror of the present, which raises the question, are we truly free, or are we still subjects in a kingdom built on shadows? What if the kings who ruled the world were not chosen by God, but by something far more sinister? Imagine that every throne, every crown was never about divine right, but about demon bloodline flowing in secret veins. History paints kings as chosen, blessed, noble. But what if behind those portraits stood the shadow of a demon whispering in their ears? His blood is in the throne becomes more than a metaphor. It becomes a chilling truth, one that reframes the way we see power. A throne, after all, isn't just a seat. It's a reminder that blood, infected blood, may have decided who leads and who kneels. Now picture the stories you were taught as a child, tales of brave kings and glorious battles. Could it be that these were nothing more than masks, hiding demon in royalty? The further you look back, the more cracks you see in the narrative. Unexplained rituals, symbols carved into crowns, strange blessings from priests. Kings' bloodline secrets were never meant for the public, but traces remain, scattered like breadcrumbs across time. It is this hidden infection of the soul, embedded in royal veins, that suggests dynasties were not simply families, they were vessels. Think of a cursed chalice passed from hand to hand, and you'll start to understand cursed thrones. Each monarch, in taking the crown, may have unknowingly or knowingly entered into a covenant that went beyond politics. These weren't just leaders. They were demonic kings, bound to something eternal. People often forget that rulers were not chosen democratically. They inherited power, and with it, infected royal blood. And when inheritance itself is corrupted, what does that say about the world shaped under such reigns? Perhaps history is not just history, it's a ritual being replayed. When we read about ancient dynasties, it's easy to dismiss their myths as stories. Yet myths are often fragments of truth. Across cultures, whispers of occult bloodlines appear. Nephilim kings in biblical echoes, rulers who claimed descent from beings that walked between heaven and earth. Some called them gods, others demons, but all agreed their blood was different. This difference wasn't celebrated openly. It was veiled in pomp and ceremony, hiding the truth beneath layers of gold and silk. Royal occult secrets were never written down for ordinary eyes. They were spoken in chambers lit by torches, where shadows told the real story. Ask yourself, why do certain families persist through centuries, untouched by the chaos that destroys common men? Hidden dynasties don't survive by chance. They survive by design. Every marriage, every alliance wasn't just about uniting lands. It was about preserving the black sun of royalty that pulsed within their veins. You can feel it when you look at old crests and coats of arms, strange beasts, lions with wings, serpents wrapped around swords. These were not random decorations. They were symbols of allegiance, coded signals to those who understood the language of power. And so the throne itself becomes more than a chair. It becomes an altar. Sitting upon it means absorbing not only the weight of a crown, but the essence of an ancient covenant. Some kings may have resisted, but resistance is useless when the throne itself binds you. It's why so many rulers fell into madness, cruelty, or strange obsessions, because they weren't ruling alone. They were sharing their soul with something far older. Occult thrones were never meant to be empty. They were vessels awaiting a body. And once a body sat, the pact was renewed. If kings were vessels, then history itself is a ritual in motion. Wars, coronations, alliances, they might look like politics, but beneath them lies ritual choreography. The demon bloodline doesn't just rule nations, it scripts reality. And the question that chills the spine is simple. If his blood is in the throne, how deep does the infection go? To answer that, we must step back and listen to the oldest myths, those ancient covenants that first bound crown and shadow together. Every kingdom begins with a story, but some stories are written not in ink, but in blood. Ancient covenants marked the first time rulers bound themselves to forces that no priest would dare name aloud. Think of pharaohs who claimed descent from gods, yet which gods did they truly serve? Some whispered they were Nephilim kings, offspring of entities that fell from the stars, beings that taught them laws of war and agriculture but demanded worship in return. These weren't fairy tales. They were veiled memories of demonic pacts, the very roots of what we now call royal occult secrets. Take Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. Its kings didn't hide their pride in invoking star-born entities. Clay tablets still echo their chants, calling down lords of the heavens who were anything but divine. They traded offerings of blood and devotion for thrones carved from shadow. Those thrones were more than seats of rule. They were cursed thrones, where his blood is in the throne became a reality, hidden behind ritual. These were the first hidden dynasties, securing their dominion not by steel alone, but by occult alliances that chained entire nations to unseen masters. And then there are the echoes found in Scripture itself. The Old Testament speaks cautiously of giants, Nephilim, whose very presence infected the land. Could it be that the kings who followed them were not conquerors, but custodians of infected royal blood? The stories of battles against these beings suggest more than war. They suggest a purge of a bloodline that never truly vanished. Like roots that twist deep underground, occult bloodlines persisted, wrapping themselves around crowns and thrones, impossible to tear out completely. But why would rulers risk their souls for such a covenant? Power. Imagine you are a tribal chief, vulnerable to drought, invasion, famine. Then imagine a voice promising victory in battle, fertile lands, obedience from your people, if only you swear allegiance. That is how demonic kings were born, men who placed survival above purity, trading eternity for dominion. These ancient covenants were deals not of faith, but of desperation, and once sealed, they rippled through generations, transforming crowns into chains. Think of it like a seed planted in royal veins. Each generation that sat upon the throne watered it through ritual, sacrifice, or simple obedience to custom. Over time, this seed became the black sun of royalty, a hidden core that guided decisions, wars, and alliances. To outsiders, kings appeared wise, divinely favored. But those who looked closer saw something different. Eyes that flickered with shadows, decrees that demanded blood, and kingdoms built on trembling foundations. Their very legitimacy was not human, it was occult. And so, the idea of divine right becomes more twisted than most realize. It wasn't divinity at all, it was shadow wrapped in silk. Every coronation was less about blessing and more about binding. The demon behind the covenant didn't need temples or worshippers, it needed thrones and dynasties. Each new ruler was a renewal of the pact, each crown a reminder of the infection within. These were not isolated deals, but threads woven into the fabric of history, invisible but unbreakable. If those first kings willingly opened the door, who or what stepped through it? The answer hides in what came next. The shadow itself did not remain a distant ally. It entered the blood, it merged with the soul, and it became inheritance. That's how the demon behind the veil began shaping kingdoms, not as a guest, but as part of the family itself. The true danger of those ancient covenants wasn't just the pact itself, it was the inheritance. Imagine a demon not worshipped in temples, but carried quietly in veins, disguised as legacy. This is where demon bloodline ceases to be myth and becomes a family tradition, hidden under robes of silk and crowns of gold. The demon behind the veil didn't demand statues or shrines, it demanded children, heirs. A lineage where his blood is in the throne could never be broken. And so, infected royal blood became the most dangerous treasure of all, unseen, yet ruling everything. Dynasties prided themselves on continuity, but what were they really preserving? Each coronation renewed the binding, each ritual tightened the knot. To the people, these rulers appeared divinely chosen. In truth, they were demonic kings, their souls partially ceded to an ancient shadow. It's no wonder many rulers displayed strange obsessions, cruelty, or sudden madness. It wasn't merely human weakness, it was the mark of a demon in royalty guiding the throne. And this demon didn't need to sit beside them. It lived within them. Think of inheritance the way we think of DNA today. We know how traits pass from parent to child, eye color, height, predispositions. Now imagine an extra thread woven in, not visible to science, but evident in history. A hunger for dominion, an attraction to war, an instinct for manipulation. These aren't random. They are the fingerprints of occult bloodlines. Just as a family might inherit wealth or land, these hidden dynasties inherited shadows. And with every generation, the infection deepened, becoming less a curse and more an identity. In practice, this meant rulers didn't simply act, they enacted. Their decrees often carried echoes of rituals, disguised as law. Wars weren't only about territory, they were sacrifices on a massive scale, blood offerings that fed the throne itself. Every fallen soldier, every burning city, became fuel for the cursed thrones. That is why history is littered with rivers of blood whenever dynasties shifted. The demon didn't just sit behind the veil, it pulled the strings of kings like a puppeteer, using nations as its stage. You can sense it even in their symbols. Look at crowns, crests, and regalia from different empires. Snakes coiled around swords, lions with blazing eyes, black suns etched into banners. These weren't mere ornaments. They were sigils, reminders of a demonic pact hidden from the public eye. Even the colors chosen, deep reds, purples, blacks, weren't random. They carried frequency, energy, allegiance. The demon behind the veil demanded representation, and the kings obeyed, cloaking their servitude in pageantry. But the demon's genius was subtlety. It never shouted, it whispered, it never claimed the throne, it infected it. Rulers believed themselves sovereign, yet every choice they made echoed the will of something older. Infected royal blood carried both privilege and burden, and no amount of wealth or power could free them. This is why so many thrones across history felt cursed, as if fortune and tragedy always came hand in hand. That paradox wasn't coincidence, it was design. And if the throne itself is an altar and the bloodline is the offering, then what happens at the moment of coronation? That is when the mask slips and the ritual is revealed. To truly understand this, we need to look at thrones as altars, the rituals of power that bind ruler and entity together, generation after generation. A throne is never just a chair. To most, it looks like wood, stone, or gold, but to those who understand, it is an altar. Thrones as altars carry the weight of centuries of ritual. Each coronation, a moment where his blood is in the throne, becomes more than poetry. When a ruler sits, it is not merely politics, it is possession. The crown seals the head, the scepter channels authority, and the throne itself binds the body to an ancient covenant. This is why so many monarchies feared mistakes during coronations, because they weren't just crowning kings, they were renewing demonic pacts. Think of how coronations unfold. Robes, oil, blessings, chants. It all feels like theater. But what if the script is older than religion itself? The priest blesses, but the true binding comes from shadow. Each word spoken echoes the same deals struck millennia ago, when kings first invited the veil into their veins. Thrones are cursed thrones, precisely because they're not symbols, they're contracts. A monarch who places himself upon such a seat doesn't just inherit a kingdom. He inherits infected royal blood, becoming one more vessel in the chain of demon bloodline. Even the architecture reinforces the ritual. Thrones were built high, towering over courtiers, forcing subjects to look up, an imitation of worship. But what they were really gazing at was a vessel of demon in royalty, a host chosen not by democracy or God, but by the persistence of occult inheritance. Thrones carved with serpents, lions, and black suns weren't decoration, they were sigils, each stroke a reinforcement of the covenant. The ruler may have looked powerful, but the throne itself was always stronger, always hungrier. And then there are the sacrifices, wars fought on coronation years, taxes demanded in blood, festivals celebrating kings with the slaughter of animals or prisoners. These were not coincidences. They were offerings. The enthronement of a demonic king wasn't complete until the throne drank its due. Hidden dynasties across the world mirrored this pattern. Pharaohs in Egypt, emperors in Rome, kings in Europe. Different rituals, same result. Thrones as altars ensured the covenant was not broken, no matter how centuries shifted. To truly grasp this, consider modern traditions. Even now, when monarchs are crowned, religious figures anoint them with oils, sacred music resounds, and jewels believed to hold power are placed on their heads. These gestures may look symbolic today, but their roots are soaked in royal occult secrets. A crown is not just metal, it's a binding halo. A throne is not furniture, it's a conduit. Those who sit are chained to the same force their ancestors invited, willingly or not, and the ritual repeats, hidden in plain sight. It is no wonder so many rulers fell into obsession, cruelty, or madness. They weren't merely acting out of human flaws, they were sharing a throne with something else. The demon behind the veil does not allow freedom, it demands continuation. This is why dynasties fought so viciously to keep their bloodlines pure. To dilute the blood would be to weaken the covenant. To preserve it was to keep the altar alive generation after generation. Thrones demanded sacrifice, and the rulers complied. If the throne is an altar, then dynasties are not families but living sigils. To understand why kings married within circles, why alliances were more about blood than love, we must see the bigger picture. The architecture of bloodlines wasn't political convenience, it was occult design. Bloodlines are not random, they are crafted, designed, and preserved with the precision of an architect drawing sacred geometry. The architecture of bloodlines explains why dynasties were so obsessed with intermarriage. They told the people it was about alliances, land, and stability, but the truth was far darker. It was about maintaining infected royal blood. Hidden dynasties understood that a demon bloodline could not survive dilution. To keep the covenant alive, they had to guard it like treasure, ensuring that every union reinforced the sigil that bound their thrones to shadow. Think about the phrase, living sigils. A sigil in occult practice is a symbol infused with intent, energy, and allegiance. Now imagine that symbol being alive, breathing, walking, your king, your queen, your entire royal family. These rulers weren't simply flesh and bone, they were occult thrones in human form. Each child born into these families wasn't just an heir, they were a continuation of a design set in motion thousands of years before. Their very existence screamed, "His blood is in the throne," even if the people around them had no idea. Look at history and you'll see it. Royal houses intermarried obsessively, Habsburgs, Tudors, Bourbons. Across continents, dynasties created webs so tangled that a single drop of new blood was rare. This wasn't just about power consolidation, it was the preservation of demonic kings. Their family trees weren't trees at all. They were labyrinths, carefully constructed so that the black sun of royalty kept shining, generation after generation. They called it purity, but what it really meant was loyalty to an ancient infection. And here lies the unsettling question. What qualities were they really preserving? Was it beauty, intelligence, or power? Or was it hunger for control, an instinct for manipulation, an affinity for war? When you trace the patterns, it becomes clear. Kings' bloodline secrets were never about virtue. They were about preserving traits useful to the covenant. Dynasties that lost those traits faded into obscurity, while those who maintained them thrived, no matter how corrupt or violent. Blood was never just biology. It was the architecture of dominion. Consider, too, the symbols woven into marriages. Every crest, every coat of arms created at the union of two houses carried coded messages. Lions entwined with serpents, crosses paired with black suns, crowns framed by occult geometry. To ordinary eyes, they were decorations. To insiders, they were confirmations that the covenant remained intact. These were the blueprints of hidden dynasties, diagrams of allegiance drawn not with ink, but with names, unions, and births. Every wedding was a ritual. Every child, a sigil renewed, and here is where it becomes personal. Imagine being born into such a family. From your first breath, you're told your role is not yours to choose. You don't marry for love, you don't live for freedom. You exist to preserve a bloodline infected by shadow. Every smile at court, every banquet, every political move is part of an ancient design. You are not just a person, you are a piece of architecture, a living stone in a temple built of blood. That realization alone explains why so many royals lived in despair or cruelty. They weren't free, they were bound sigils. If bloodlines themselves are architecture, then crowns and regalia are the finishing touches, the decorations of that occult design. And to truly uncover the depth of this infection, we need to study the black sun of royalty, where hidden symbols in crowns and jewels reveal allegiance not to God, but to something far older. Crowns have always been sold to us as halos of divinity, symbols of wisdom and justice. But what if the gems, metals, and engravings were never about beauty or wealth? The black sun of royalty hides in plain sight, carved into the very regalia kings and queens wore. Each jewel is more than decoration. It is a talisman, a channel of energy meant to bind the ruler to the covenant. His blood is in the throne isn't just a phrase, it is encoded in sapphires, rubies and obsidian that sit upon the heads of demons in royalty. And every time the crown touches the brow, the pact whispers again. Think of the metals chosen. Gold, revered for its incorruptibility, wasn't just prized for wealth, it symbolized eternal allegiance, an unbreakable bond. Silver, tied to the moon, carried energies of reflection and concealment. Even iron, often used in swords, was forged into crowns to remind the ruler that war was part of their inheritance. Cursed thrones weren't simply occupied. They were accessorized with regalia designed as occult tools. When kings lifted their scepters, they weren't holding sticks of power, they were wielding wands of ritual. Symbols were no less deliberate, crosses tilted, serpents coiled, suns darkened. Each carving was a code. The black sun of royalty appeared subtly, often hidden in geometric patterns or cloaked beneath religious motifs. To the public, these seemed like harmless ornaments. To those within the covenant, they were confirmation of the demon bloodline. Kings' bloodline secrets weren't just guarded in scrolls or vaults. They were worn on crowns, waved in banners, stitched into robes. Every coronation was both spectacle and spell. Look at the jewels themselves. Historians claim they were plundered from wars and colonies, but their placement tells another story. The largest gem always sits at the center of the crown, right at the forehead, the seat of vision, the so-called third eye. Was this coincidence? Or was it meant to align rulers with something beyond human sight? Infected royal blood needed more than lineage. It needed channels. And regalia became those channels, silent instruments through which shadows kept their grip on thrones. Even the rituals of maintenance carried meaning. When crowns were polished, when jewels were cleansed in sacred water or oils, these weren't acts of vanity. They were renewals of the pact. Imagine a king kneeling as his regalia is blessed by clergy. Outwardly, it appears as a divine ritual. Inwardly, it is the renewal of demonic pacts performed under the guise of religion. Occult thrones thrived on this double layer. What the masses saw as piety was, in truth, a veil for allegiance to something far older. And regalia wasn't just for the ruler. Queens, princes, and entire courts wore miniature versions of these talismans. The infection wasn't meant to stay on a single head. It was to spread, to weave a web of authority across the entire dynasty. That's why hidden dynasties guarded their jewels with near-obsessive devotion. To lose a gem wasn't to lose wealth. It was to lose a piece of the architecture binding their covenant. Wars have been fought, assassinations plotted, all over regalia carrying the Black Sun's mark. But regalia alone couldn't control nations. It had to move through blood, through will, through decisions that shaped the destiny of entire peoples. And that brings us to the next revelation, the whispers of control, where we see how the demon's essence, once enthroned, commanded not only rulers but nations themselves. Once the covenant is sealed and the regalia charged, the true influence begins, not in symbols, but in whispers. The whispers of control are subtle, invisible to the eye, yet devastating in their reach. Infected, royal blood doesn't simply sit in thrones. It radiates through decrees, wars, and laws. Demon bloodline doesn't roar, it guides. Imagine a king signing a declaration of war, his hand steady, his mind convinced its strategy. But beneath that decision lies something deeper, the whisper of demon in royalty urging sacrifice. And when his blood is in the throne, every battlefield becomes an altar. History is full of rulers whose choices seemed irrational. Kings who bled their nations dry with endless wars, queens who demanded ritual executions, emperors obsessed with conquest at any cost. Were these merely human flaws? Or were they the results of whispers flowing through cursed thrones? It is almost as if nations themselves were puppets, their strings pulled by demonic kings whose veins carried shadows. Hidden dynasties thrived not by ruling wisely, but by feeding the covenant, because blood wasn't just spilled, it was harvested. Think of taxation. On the surface, it's economics. But when kings demanded not only coin, but livestock, grain, or even human lives, it echoes sacrifice. Ancient festivals tied to harvests often included ritual killings, disguised as offerings to gods. In truth, they were royal occult secrets, acts meant to strengthen the bloodline's bond with its shadow. These weren't coincidences, they were patterns, repeated so consistently across civilizations that they betray an unseen architect. Even law itself becomes suspicious. How many decrees punished heresy or treason, with burning, hanging, or beheading? And why were executions always public, theatrical, designed to provoke fear? Because fear is energy. Demonic pacts are not nourished only by blood, but by emotion, Terror, despair, obedience. Every nation ruled by hidden dynasties functioned as a living temple. The citizens thought they were subjects of kings, but in reality, they were participants in rituals disguised as governance. But the Whispers didn't just command cruelty, they commanded innovation when it suited their purpose. Consider great monuments, pyramids, ziggurats, cathedrals. Built with impossible labor, often costing countless lives, they were more than symbols of power. They were energetic nodes, amplifiers for the black sun of royalty. Each stone laid was a silent echo of the covenant, and every ruler who ordered them left behind more than architecture. They left sigils etched into the very land, monuments that still pulse with unseen resonance. These patterns aren't confined to ancient history. Even modern empires have moved entire nations based on decisions that make no rational sense. Wars waged for reasons never fully explained. Alliances formed on fragile grounds. Blood spilled without measure. It feels almost scripted, as if the same whispers that once guided pharaohs still murmur in the ears of presidents, bankers, and hidden elites. Could it be that the demon bloodline never ended, but simply adapted, using new costumes for the same theater of power? If whispers can guide nations, then who sanctifies them? Who covers their tracks so the masses never see the truth? That leads us to the next revelation, the church and the throne, where blessings that appear holy may in fact be veils, hiding curses older than Christianity itself. For centuries, the church and the throne walked hand in hand, presenting themselves as guardians of divine order. But behind the incense, the hymns, and the golden altars, something far darker hid in plain sight. The coronation of kings was framed as a holy sacrament, yet each blessing was a veil concealing curses older than Scripture itself. His blood is in the throne was sanctified by holy oils, chants, and prayers, while in truth it renewed demonic pacts whispered through ages. The union of altar and crown wasn't accidental. It was the perfect camouflage for demon and royalty. Consider the rituals. A king kneels, a priest anoints his head with sacred oil, and choirs proclaim him chosen by God. But what if those very actions were borrowed from occult rites far predating Christianity? Ancient rituals of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Babylon echo in these ceremonies, disguised as holiness. To the people, the king became God's representative. In reality, he became a vessel for infected royal blood. The church, knowingly or not, acted as custodian of cursed thrones, ensuring every coronation sealed the same covenant. Look at the symbolism layered into the rites. The crown lowered by bishops resembled a halo, but its true essence was the black sun of royalty pressed against the ruler's brow. The scepter handed to the king wasn't just authority, it was an occult wand of command. Even the throne placed within cathedrals transformed the entire building into an altar. King's bloodline secrets were wrapped in scripture, making rebellion against them not just treason, but heresy. The genius of this arrangement is that it blurred lines. Who could question the ruler if questioning meant defying God? The church benefited too. In aligning with hidden dynasties, it inherited wealth, land, and power beyond measure. Priests crowned kings, and kings funded priests. Yet behind this partnership was a darker exchange. The church gave legitimacy, while the dynasty gave offerings. Royal occult secrets became cloaked investments, hidden in cathedrals, whispered in Latin. And so, while the masses prayed for salvation, demonic kings ruled with the confidence that their infection was untouchable, guarded by faith itself. This alliance explains why persecution was so fierce. Heretics, witches, dissenters, anyone who dared question the system were silenced with fire and blade. But were they punished for defying God or for threatening to reveal the truth about occult thrones? Fear became the greatest tool of control, sanctified by sermons and scripture. And while peasants feared hell, kings and bishops ensured that the real hell, the covenant of blood remained hidden behind stained glass and solemn hymns. Think of the architecture of cathedrals. Massive, towering, impossible to ignore, they were built not just for worship, but as amplifiers. The geometry, the acoustics, the alignment with stars, all hinted at knowledge far older than the Bible. Thrones within these sacred halls weren't seats of divine favor, but altars of shadow concealed in sanctuaries of light. This duality, light outside, shadow within, is the essence of blessings that conceal curses. And it worked brilliantly, century after century. Yet curses never fade, they adapt. As monarchies waned, the covenant survived, shifting into new bloodlines, new elites, new institutions. To understand how this infection persists even today, we must follow the thread of survival, tracing the survival of the line. How ancient thrones became modern powers. The fall of empires should have ended their influence, but somehow the same families lingered, reshaping themselves with every new age. The survival of the line proves that demon bloodline doesn't die with collapsing thrones. It adapts. Pharaohs became emperors, emperors became kings, kings became aristocrats, and today those hidden dynasties are disguised as financiers, politicians, and global elites. His blood is in the throne, may no longer sit under golden crowns, yet the infection of infected royal blood thrives in boardrooms, palaces, and secret councils. The form changed, but the essence remained. Look at history closely and you'll notice a pattern. When monarchies fell, their wealth never vanished, it was transferred. Land became capital, armies became corporations, thrones became parliaments, and always, behind the transfer, the same surnames appeared. Cursed thrones no longer required palaces. Skyscrapers and banks served the same role. The black sun of royalty still glows, but now it hides in logos, insignias, and institutions that rule with invisible scepters. The stage looks modern, but the script is ancient. Consider the aristocracy of Europe. Even today, families trace their lineage back to medieval dynasties, boasting bloodlines linked to Charlemagne, the Tudors, or the Habsburgs. But these claims are more than vanity, they're confessions. Occult bloodlines brag of their continuity because survival itself is the covenant. By ensuring intermarriage, wealth preservation, and strategic alliances, they carried demon in royalty straight into the 21st century. They no longer wear crowns, but their influence dictates markets, wars, and politics. Think about banking dynasties. The Rothschilds, Rockefellers, and others have become almost mythological in conspiracy theories. But strip away exaggeration, and the truth remains: power concentrated in families who, generation after generation, expand influence without interruption. This mirrors exactly the strategies of ancient dynasties. Control the flow of resources, shape the narrative, preserve the bloodline. Kings' bloodline secrets didn't disappear. They were privatized, hidden behind foundations, trusts, and corporations. The tools evolved, but the covenant stayed intact. Even in politics, the survival is obvious. Families like the Kennedys, the Bushes, or the Windsors maintained power across decades, their names echoing with both prestige and tragedy. Coincidences, or echoes of the same curse that haunted pharaohs and Caesars? Infected royal blood doesn't just bring power, it carries the weight of sacrifice. Assassinations, scandals, and downfalls often look like misfortune, but to those who see deeper, they resemble offerings, rituals ensuring the continuation of a cult inheritance. And look at how culture itself reinforces this survival. Movies, literature, and art glorify royal blood, noble heritage, and the mystique of elite families. Why do we still obsess over monarchy in an age of democracy? Because the covenant thrives not only in politics, but in imagination. Hidden dynasties keep their grip by embedding themselves in culture. making us admire, envy, and even defend their existence. The infection doesn't just control laws, it shapes dreams. But perhaps the most unsettling truth is this: if the Covenant survived empires, revolutions, and modernity, then it's not a relic, it's alive. And to grasp its living presence, we must meditate on the symbolic heart of it all, where the demon in the blood of power reveals itself not just as inheritance, but as a mirror of humanity's own hunger for control. When we look back at history, it is tempting to believe that kings and queens shaped nations out of vision, courage, or fate. Yet the deeper we go, the more we see that power itself was never pure. The demon in the blood of power is not only about rulers, but about us. His blood is in the throne, may echo through dynasties, but it also whispers within humanity's hunger for dominion. Demon bloodline reminds us that authority rarely comes without shadow. And perhaps the curse of infected royal blood is not isolated, it is a mirror, reflecting the darkness all people carry when given power. Think of how ordinary men, once handed authority, often transform. A manager becomes a tyrant. A leader becomes obsessed with control. A nation rises in war under the spell of fear. These aren't just political patterns, they are echoes of the same infection that haunted cursed thrones. Demon in royalty is only a magnified version of something that already lurks in human nature. The temptation to dominate rather than guide, to hoard rather than share. King's bloodline secrets may sound distant, but they resonate in every decision where power corrupts. The haunting question is not whether hidden dynasties exist. We have traced them through crowns, regalia, and bloodlines. The real question is how much of their infection we allow into ourselves. Every time fear dictates choices, every time greed blinds judgment, every time cruelty replaces compassion, the same demon breathes through our actions. Royal occult secrets are terrifying because they suggest that the throne is not external, it is symbolic. We all sit on thrones of choice, and every decision can either free us or bind us deeper. Look at the cycles of history. Empires rise, empires fall, but patterns never change. Wars repeat, elites persist, dynasties reinvent themselves. Why? Because the demon bloodline doesn't die, it adapts. And just as kings became bankers, priests became politicians, altars became boardrooms, the same infection mutates within ordinary lives. The black sun of royalty glows not only above crowns, but also within systems that promise progress while demanding sacrifice. It thrives wherever control outweighs compassion. This is where the reflection becomes personal. What is power, if not a test? For the kings of old, it was a throne carved in shadow. For us, it may be smaller but no less dangerous. The power over family, over employees, over communities. And the question lingers: when you taste authority, do you serve others, or do you serve the shadow? Infected royal blood teaches us that curses spread not just through veins, but through choices. Every action either breaks or renews the covenant, and so the story comes full circle. Thrones as altars, ancient covenants, hidden dynasties, all of it points back to the same truth. Power always carries a price. The demon in the blood of power is not only about royal bloodlines, but about human will itself. To recognize this is to see history differently, to realize that behind every coronation, every empire, every revolution lies the same infection. And whether we inherit it or create it ourselves, the shadow demands attention. So now, the haunting question remains: when power calls, whose blood answers within you? Because if the infection of kings was only a reflection of humanity itself, then perhaps the real throne is closer than we think. And with that thought, we step into the introduction of what crowns and curses have always tried to hide. His blood is in the throne, the demon that infected the line of kings. So now you've seen what history books never dared to reveal: thrones carved in blood, dynasties preserved as living sigils, and curses hidden behind crowns and cathedrals. But here's the question that matters. What will you do with this knowledge? Because if his blood is in the throne isn't just about demon in royalty, but also about the shadow in human nature, then ignoring it means letting the infection spread unchecked. Will you keep following the script written by hidden dynasties? Or will you break free from the whispers of control that still shape nations today? Ask yourself, how often do you give your energy, your time, your obedience to systems that feed on your fear? How many decisions have you made that weren't really yours, but echoes of ancient pacts replayed through society? If kings and queens surrendered to infected royal blood, what happens when ordinary people surrender to the same hunger for power, comfort, or domination? The reflection is uncomfortable, but it's also liberating, because awareness is the first step toward freedom. And maybe the most provocative question of all: if entire kingdoms were scripted by demonic pacts, what parts of your life are scripted right now? What beliefs, fears, or habits are thrones that you still kneel before without realizing it? The real fight isn't in palaces or cathedrals, it's in your choices, every single day. If you're ready to keep unveiling secrets like these, then don't just watch and leave. Be part of this journey. Subscribe to the channel, activate the notifications, and stay with me as we uncover what history, religion, and power have tried so hard to bury. Because the truth isn't just hidden in the past, it's still pulsing in the present, and the next revelation may change the way you see everything.